The NBA Finals is officially here, and I'm going to tell you guys why this NBA Finals matchup between the New York Knicks and the San Antonio Spurs is going to be a legendary matchup. Yes, sorry, baby. We're going to get into these NBA Finals, and I'm going to give you guys my thoughts on this series, why this series is going to be a legendary NBA Finals match, and I'm going to give you a prediction who I think is going to actually win the NBA Finals. But before I get started on that, I want to tell you guys to hit that subscribe button. Like, comment, and share. And tell a friend, tell a family member, tell whoever to support my channel. And the NBA Finals is officially here between the New York Knicks and the San Antonio Spurs. Ooh, sorry, baby. We here, baby. We are here. The New York Knicks and the San Antonio Spurs. Victor Wembanyama, 22 years old, third year, going to the NBA Finals against the New York Knicks, an NBA franchise that has not won an NBA championship since 1973. 1973. Was the last time the New York Knicks won an NBA championship. That was 56 years. Was it? I want to say 53 years ago. I think that's right. 53 years ago. I mean, crazy. But we here. It's the NBA Finals. And look, man, I'm gonna keep it real. I believe that this NBA Finals matchup between the New York Knicks and the San Antonio Spurs is gonna be legendary. This is a legendary series that we're getting ourselves into. I think this series is gonna be epic. I think this is gonna be one of the best NBA Finals I've seen we've seen in, I want to say, in 13 years. I'm going way back to the San Antonio Spurs Miami Heat NBA Finals in 2013. I think this matchup we got coming up with the Knicks and Spurs is going to be that epic. Every game is going to be must-see TV, and I think these two teams are going to battle it out from start to finish. This is going to be special when we talking about these NBA Finals, man. The Knicks and the Spurs. This is what it's all about. This is the matchups make fights, man. Styles make fights, man. This is what it's all about right here. Spurs, Knicks. And for me, man, when I look at this matchup, I think it's a fascinating matchup. To me, I think it's a fascinating matchup on both sides of the ball. When I look at how the Spurs are going to defend the Knicks, I think that part of the matchup is interesting to me, because I think one of the things that comes to mind when we're talking about how the Knicks are going to defend. Did I say the Spurs are going to defend the Knicks, or the Knicks are going to defend the Spurs? I can't remember what I said in the beginning. But when we talk about how the Spurs are going to defend the Knicks, right? I guess we'll go on to that part of the matchup. Spurs defending the Knicks. It's interesting because the Knicks offensively is that they have found something with the Knicks offensively when you look at how the Knicks have been able to diverse their offense. And when you look at how the Knicks, one of the reasons why they fired Tom Thibodeau last year, despite the fact that the Knicks went to the conference finals and them losing, is they were criticized under Tom Thibodeau, I think, for two reasons. One, he didn't play his bench enough. He leaned too heavily with his starters. So he was playing his starters way too many minutes, and they wore down. And I think the other criticism that people had of Tom Thibodeau is he leaned way too much into Jalen Brunson. A lot of Jalen Brunson iso ball, pounding the ball, dribbling and pick and roll, going one-on-one, and then having him make all the decisions. And that style of offense kind of wore down. And you kind of saw it against the Pacers. Whereas, they fired Tom Thibodeau, and then they bring in Mike Brown. And Mike Brown, he came from the Golden State Warriors tree. He came from the Warriors, and he went to the Kings, and the Kings had a little bit of success under his watch. And one of the reasons why he had success with the Kings is he brought in a ball movement style. Moving the ball, running your offense through your centers, having a diverse attack, running your offense through Domantas Sabonis, running your offense through De'Aaron Fox. And what he's brought to the Knicks is kind of similar. Well, yeah, they'll still lean into Brunson a good bit, but we're going to run our offense through Cat. We saw it in games 4, 5, and 6 of the Atlanta Hawks series when Mike Brown switched up his offense. We ran stuff through Cat, and Cat's playing point center. Finding cutters, finding shooters. And we're not going to run our offense through Cat. We'll run our offense through OG Anunoby for sometimes. We'll give him the ball in the mid post. We'll have him run pick and roll. He can score in the mid post, or he can attack a mismatch, or he'll find people. Even occasionally we'll run our offense through Mikal Bridges, and he'll do the same thing. And so you see a more diverse attack with these New York Knicks, and it just makes them harder to guard, man. It's hard to guard, and we've seen how the Knicks have been playing offensively since Game 4 of the Hawks series. Offensively, they're unstoppable right now. They're making everything. They can't miss. And so if you're the San Antonio Spurs, how do you combat that? How do you guard what the Knicks have been able to do? Because I'm going to be honest, I think the Knicks offense presents a different challenge compared to what OKC brought in the conference finals. Even though I think Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is a top 2 player and he was the MVP, and even though Oklahoma City had a better record, they finished with the best record in the league. They won 64 games. You look at the Knicks and how they've kind of been built offensively. They just have guys all over their roster that's just a threat to score the basketball. Jalen Brunson, Karl Anthony Towns, OG Anunoby, Mikal Bridges, even Josh Hart. You see teams kind of play their centers off Josh Hart because you don't believe Josh Hart can shoot, but Josh Hart has had games where he's made 5 threes, and if he's not making threes, he's grabbing offensive rebounds, he's attacking the transition, he's cutting to the basket. You got Miles brought off the bench. He can hit threes. Landry Shamet, who was key in the last couple of games of the Cleveland series, he can make threes. Jordan Clarkson can make threes. And so the Knicks just got shooters and scores galore on their team. You compare that to Oklahoma City, you had Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who can look, man, we all know what Shai represents, but Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is a guy that can, as far as great as he is, he's not really much of a three-point shooter. He doesn't really take a lot of threes at times. Like he prefers to get in the mid-range, and he prefers to get to the basket, and he prefers to draw fouls. So, and when you consider the fact that Jalen Williams didn't play, he was injured, he wasn't 100%, and he wasn't really healthy, and you have A.J. Mitchell, who's their third leading scorer or third best perimeter scorer, he wasn't healthy, and so OKC was kind of limited in the shot creation, guys that can get their own shot, perimeter scorers outside of Shai, and so they weren't really working with too much. You had to depend on Alex Caruso. You had to depend on Jarrett McCain. You're depending on Cason Wallace. You're depending on Kendrick Williams and Jalen Williams. It felt like OKC, even though they're a pretty deep team with a lot of solid quality players, opposite Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, it just felt like they were lacking in the offensive firepower department. And I felt like that ultimately ended up being their undoing. I think that's different with the Knicks. The Knicks just have a lot of guys who can beat you from anywhere. And I think for San Antonio defensively, how would they be able to combat that? Who's going to guard Jalen Brunson? I'm assuming you're going to see Stephon Castle and Jalen Brunson. You're right. I'm assuming you're going to see Wembanyama on Josh Hart, because every team that's playing the Knicks, they're going to put their centers on Josh Hart because they don't believe Josh Hart can shoot. And so you want to limit And so teams look at that and say that's the way they limit the Knicks offense, right? And so if you're gonna put Wemby on Josh Hart, who's gonna guard Karl Anthony Towns? Is it gonna be De'Aaron Fox? Probably not. You're probably gonna see Devin Vassell on him on Karl Anthony Towns. Julian Champagnie. Who does he play? I'm assuming you might see him on. Maybe you see him on Mikal Bridges or OG Anunoby. You probably see him on OG Anunoby. I'm guessing if I had to guess. And so it's a fascinating dynamic for the Spurs as far as who matches up with who, who's gonna guard Karl Anthony Towns, who's gonna guard OG Anunoby, who's gonna guard Mikal Bridges, and look, man, a key part of the Spurs defense is they got that 7'5" monster Victor Wembanyama in the paint, patrolling the rim. And so that's gonna be fascinating. That's, to me, it's fascinating because the Knicks, they just, like I mentioned in the preview, they just have compared to Oklahoma City, the Knicks just have more ways to attack a defense outside of just depending on just one player to create everything. And so to me that's what makes it fascinating. It's gonna be fascinating for the Spurs to see how they're gonna use Wemby. Is he gonna be strictly in drop coverage? Because the Knicks can play 5-out basketball. If you take Josh Hart out of the game and you put in Miles McBride, now you can play 5-out, and now that gets really fascinating because now it's like, okay, you can't have Wemby in the paint all the time, because if he's in the paint, someone's gonna be open. OG Anunoby might be open for that corner three that he loves to take. And so, to me, I think defensively for the Spurs, for the Spurs, I think the Knicks present a unique challenge to how they'll be able to attack them on offense. How the Knicks will be able to attack the Spurs offensively. That OKC kind of quite didn't have, considering that Jalen Williams and Adrian Mitchell wasn't healthy. Minnesota doesn't quite have that because you're depending on Rudy Gobert a lot because you got to play him a lot of minutes because he helps their defense, but offensively he's limited. Kind of the same with Portland. Portland, you're playing Donovan Clingan and Robert Williams. And so with the Knicks, you playing Karl Anthony Towns a lot of minutes. You playing Karl Anthony Towns. Karl Anthony Towns is a matchup problem because if you putting Wemby on Karl Anthony Towns, the lanes might open up, but if you put a Devin Vassell on Karl Anthony Towns or Julian Champagnie on Karl Anthony Towns, and Karl Anthony Towns can bully them down low, get them in the paint, attack the basket, attack off the dribble. And so Karl Anthony Towns, man, him being a dominant presence, how he plays offensively could really tip the cap for the Knicks in this series like this. And so I think the Spurs defensively, I think there's some challenges that the Knicks will be able to have against them. And so it's just something to look forward to. And then you look on the other side of the ball, you have the Knicks defensively, how they'll be able to guard the Spurs. And I guess, and to me, I think the key for this is who does Jalen Brunson guard? Who does Karl Anthony Towns guard? And for Karl Anthony Towns, the biggest key for him in this series is he's got to stay out of foul trouble. And for the most part, for Karl Anthony Towns, he's done a good job of not being in foul trouble. And I think it's really going to be important in this series because Mitchell Robinson's dealing with this pinky thing, with his hand. And so he's not going to be 100%. And I'm imagining that with Mitchell Robinson, you want to limit his minutes to a certain degree. You don't want him playing 25, 30 minutes, because Karl Anthony Towns in foul trouble, right? And also offensively, he's kind of limited when it comes to free throw shooting, and all this other stuff. And also with Mitchell Robinson, you playing him with opposite Cat. Your offense becomes a little bit less dynamic, and so Karl Anthony Towns is gonna have to not be in foul trouble, not pick up silly fouls, you know, not things of that nature, not try to do too much. And so I'm looking at the Knicks defensively in a series like this, and I do wonder like who does Jalen Brunson guard? Because excuse me, but Stephon Castle, like he's an attacker, like he plays physical, like he will attack you, and so you got him, you got De'Aaron Fox. De'Aaron Fox is a guy that can score and go at you, right? And so you have him, Devin Vassell. He's a guy that can score a little bit. He can hit threes off. He can hit threes. Julian Champagnie, he's a guy that, as we saw in the last couple of games against Oklahoma City, he's capable of having big games. He had 20 points in Game 7. He hit 6 threes. And so who do you put Jalen Brunson on? And also, who guards Wemby? Are you going to put OG Anunoby on Wemby? Because most teams are putting their smaller forward type guys on Wemby nowadays. They're not putting their centers on him. Or do you start off putting Cat on Wemby? And to me, that's kind of the factor. You playing Cat, if Cat's guarding Wemby, then if I'm Karl Anthony Towns, again, staying on the court, not drawing fouls, not committing fouls. That to me, that's going to be an important factor for the Knicks, in a series defensively. And so it's going to be fascinating on that front because, who does Cat guard? If you putting Cat on Wemby, Cat might get 2 fouls. And if he's getting 2 fouls and he's out the game, you playing more Mitchell Robinson at center, or maybe you're playing more OG Anunoby. And now you're super small. If you're the Knicks. And so I think defensively, I think there's some challenges that I think the Knicks defensively have as far as like who does Cat guard, who does Jalen Brunson guard, also the Knicks, also the Spurs. They also play small. You got Julian, who's going to guard OG Anunoby, because Julian Champagnie is 6'5", and he's kind of slight, and OG Anunoby, he's big. He's a big forward. Mikal Bridges, he's about 6'7", 215 pounds. He's in, Devin Vassell, 6'5". And so you look at the matchups that the Knicks have defensively, like they're 2 through 4 when you talk about Josh Hart and OG Anunoby and Julian and Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, and Josh Hart. They're big. Like, they're bigger than the Knicks 2 through 4 perimeter guys. Because Julian Champagnie is like 6'5". Devin Vassell is 6'5". And Stephon Castle's like 6'4", 6'3", 6'4". And so I think that's something to look at as well when I look at a matchup like this. As far as like the Knicks defensively, how the Spurs will be able to attack them, because Wemby, like he should have his way against the Knicks in the paint or on the perimeter, because who's gonna guard Wemby, and so that's something to look forward to, and also for the Spurs on offense. I think getting out in transition is going to be key, and that's one thing that the Knicks defensively, if there's one thing that I think the Knicks defensively have been weak at, is they're not always a great transition defensive team. Now the Cavs, they didn't have athletes, and so they weren't really able to take advantage of that. The Sixers, kind of the same thing. They didn't really take advantage of the Knicks transition defense. The Hawks, I thought earlier in that series, I think the Hawks was able to have some success attacking the Knicks in transition, but the Knicks, look, they made their adjustments and they kind of tightened up their transition defense. They were offensively, they were able to just make everything. And so the Hawks weren't really able to get out and run as much. And so if I'm the Spurs, I think attacking the Knicks in transition, they're gonna have to figure out a way to do that. And if you get and if the Spurs are in transition, they're tough, because Stephon Castle is a for a 2 guard, he's big and physical and he can get out on the break. De'Aaron Fox can get out on the break. Dylan Harper, same thing, can get out on the break. Devin Vassell and Julian Champagnie, they can get out and spot up and hit corner threes. And we all know what Wemby can do when he's out on the break. He's a 7'5" freak monster, right? And so I think the transition attack for the Spurs is also going to be key as well. And so you look at a matchup like this, I feel like both teams have their set of advantages on offense and how they can attack the opposing team's defense. And that's what makes this NBA Finals so exciting. It's what makes Spurs Knicks just a juicy, sexy matchup. And why I think this matchup between the Knicks and the Spurs is going to be legendary. We're going to have some legendary moments in this series, man. I'm telling y'all. This Spurs Knicks series, we gonna have some legendary moments in this series, man. I'm telling y'all. And like I'm expecting this series to go at least 6 games. Minimum. At least 6 games. And I would be shocked if either the Knicks or the Spurs end up winning in 5 games. Like I'm expecting this series to be a long series. I really do. And it's just some fascinating matchups all across the board. Like who's gonna guard like Jalen? You look at the Spurs defensively. Jalen Brunson, I think is as like I think Jalen Brunson has some unique advantages in how he's gonna be able to attack the Spurs defense. Because the one thing about Jalen Brunson, I think he's a 3-level scorer. I think he's a guy that you have to, when you're playing against Jalen Brunson, you have to honor him. You have to honor his 3-ball because he can hit threes, right? Like, and if you guard him up from 3, he has great footwork and he's crafty and he's able to use his body and footwork to get to his spots and get to where he wants to on the court. Like Jalen Brunson might be 6'1", but he plays like he's 6'8". Because he's just crafty and big for his size, and he can just use his shoulder and kind of nudge the defender off of him, and he can pull up from anywhere. And so, who's going to guard Brunson? I think you're going to see more Stephon Castle, but if Stephon Castle's not guarding him, I think Brunson's a tough matchup for De'Aaron Fox. I think he's a little bit of a tough matchup for Devin Vassell. Dylan Harper's a rookie. He plays hard and he's physical, and I love Dylan Harper. But I think that could be a tough matchup for him if he's guarding Jalen Brunson. Who's gonna guard OG Anunoby? If you're the Spurs. And for Karl-Anthony Towns, like if Wemby's guarding Karl-Anthony Towns, the lane's gonna open up for all the other Spurs perimeter defenders. If you put a smaller wing on him, then Karl-Anthony Towns might have an advantage. So it's just a lot of fascinating matchups all across the board for the Knicks and and if you're the Knicks and you're guarding the Spurs, again, like, who's gonna guard Wemby? You're gonna put Cat on Wemby and risk him getting in foul trouble, or are you gonna put OG Anunoby on Wemby? And as a result, who's Cat's gonna guard? You gonna put him on Devin Vassell, or are you gonna put him on Julian Champagnie? And so, and one thing I will say about Karl-Anthony Towns, I think defensively, I think he's been good. Karl-Anthony Towns has been maligned for his defense over his career, and I think it's been fair at times. But I gotta give Karl-Anthony Towns credit, man. I think defensively, he's done a really nice job. I think he's done a nice job as a rim protector. I think he's done a nice job as a positional defender, being in the right spots, executing the coverages. I got to give Karl-Anthony Towns a lot of credit, man. Like the way he's been playing defense for the Knicks, in these playoffs, it's like he's playing at Kentucky, because, if for people that watch Karl-Anthony Towns in college, he was a good defender in college. Like, there's a reason why he went number 1 overall. and it hasn't quite translated for most of his career. But what we've seen with Karl Anthony Towns in the Knicks, in the New York Knicks, is we're seeing a guy that's committing himself on the defensive end of the court, man. And there's a reason why the New York Knicks are in the NBA Finals. And you got to give Karl Anthony Towns a lot of credit for what he's been doing, not just offensively, but defensively as well. And so, to me, I'm uber excited about this matchup in general. Victor Wembanyama, like, I just want to get into him a little bit more. I mean, you talking about a dude who's 22 years old, year 3, that took his team to the NBA Finals. I mean, and you looking at a Spurs team that is so young. You don't see young teams like this take their teams to the. You don't see young teams like this show so much poise, and for them to go all the way to the finals like this. Like, it just doesn't happen. It doesn't happen, especially a 22-year-old like Victor Wembanyama leading the way, and the way he's been impacting the game offensively. Like, this is a dude that's 7'5", and he has 2 guard skills. He's hitting pull-up threes, step back threes, attacking off the dribble, scoring in the paint, grabbing rebounds, dunking on folks, catching lobs. And defensively, he's even better on that end than he is on offense. Like, it's crazy the way he's been able to patrol the paint and block shots. Like, just a generational player. And I think the viewing public that doesn't watch basketball are going to watch these NBA Finals, and they're going to be like, who the hell is this dude? Who is this guy? Like people are going to be watching Victor Wembanyama in awe. And what this dude is going to be able to showcase on the basketball court. Because there's just not many human beings on planet Earth that can do the things that Victor Wembanyama can do on the court at that size. Like, it's incredible. And like I said, man, look, man, when it comes to legendary players, Victor Wembanyama, like, he's gonna have some legendary moments in this series. And keep this in mind, like the last player of his ilk that I can go back to and say this dude led his team to the finals at a early age. So we got to go back to Magic Johnson in 1980 when he was drafted early. I think he was drafted top 2, and he led the Lakers to the NBA Finals as a rookie, and he won a championship. This is Magic Johnson, and we all know what Magic Johnson was able to do for the rest of his career. Leading the Lakers to multiple winning seasons and NBA Finals appearances and championships. Like, we could be looking at Victor Wembanyama doing something of that ilk, like, right now. When we talking about what Victor Wembanyama's been able to do, man, it's incredible. It is incredible. And, when I look at this matchup, to me, it's a lot of advantages on both teams. I think both teams are going to have a chance to be able to exploit each other's weaknesses. But and so when I look at this, finals matchup, as I'm analyzing and looking at the advantages that I think both teams are going to have on both sides of the ball, if you're forcing me to give out a prediction, if you're forcing me to give out a prediction as to who I think is going to win this series, considering the advantages that I think both teams have on that side of the ball, and as painfully as it is for me to admit this, I've been going back and forth on who I think is going to win this series between the Knicks and the Spurs. And I'm going with the Knicks. I'm going the New York Knicks in 7 games. I'm picking the New York Knicks in 7 games. And it's painful for me to admit this, but I'm going with the Knicks. I'm taking the New York Knicks in 7 games in this series against the San Antonio Spurs. As great as Victor Wembanyama is, as much as I think Victor Wembanyama is on a greatest of all time trajectory, and I think this dude is on a GOAT trajectory, I'm still going to go with the New York Knicks in this series. And the reason why is I just think the Knicks are ready for this. I think they're ready. And typically, when you look at young teams, like I'm just of the mind that if you're a young team, you gotta go through your lumps. Because all young great teams with great players, they go through their lumps. LeBron James went through his lumps. Michael Jordan went through his lumps. Larry Bird went through his lumps. Now, I guess you could say Magic Johnson. He had his share of lumps, but he won a championship his first year. So maybe you could say him. But still, like, great players, most great players with great teams go through their lumps. Especially for a Spurs team that's this young. Like, this is a young team. And whereas with the Knicks, Jalen Brunson's in year 8. Karl Anthony Towns in year 11. Josh Hart's in year 9. OG Anunoby's in year 9. Mikal Bridges in year 8. Miles McBride is in year 5. Like, Mitchell Robinson's in year 8. Like, most of the Knicks key players are all in their 8th and 11th seasons. There's experience on their side. Whereas I look at the Spurs, and I look at their guys, Victor Wembanyama's in year 3. Dylan Harper's a rookie. Devin Vassell, he's in year 7, but this is his first year in the playoffs. Keldon Johnson's in year 7, but it's his first year in the playoffs. Darren Fox, okay, he's in year 9, but this is Darren Fox's second year in the playoffs, right? And so, Stephon Castle, he's in year 2. Like, this is a young team. And I just think at some point, experience is going to pay off. And I just look at the Knicks, and look, man, it pains me to say this because, look, man, I'm a Hawk fan. I'm a fan of a team that the Knicks beat down in the first round, embarrassed them, win the game by 51 points. But sometimes your eyes are your eyes. And for me, I'm looking at what's been happening with these New York Knicks. And to me, it reminds me of the 2011 Dallas Mavericks, where it just feels like they just caught something. They caught a little lightning in a bottle. And the Mavs was able to just go on a run, and they were able to beat the Brandon Roy Blazers, and then they were able to beat Kobe Bryant, and then they were able to beat a young upstart Oklahoma City Thunder team led by Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook, and then they were able to beat LeBron James in the NBA Finals. And I'm kind of starting to feel the same way with these Knicks, man. Like, maybe I'm reading too much into the competition, but look, man, I think there's something there with these Knicks. I think something's clicking, and I just think they're going to continue their momentum heading into these NBA Finals. And it also helps that I think they're well-rested as well. Whereas you look at the Oklahoma City Thunder, they went through a gauntlet of a 7-game series against the Oklahoma City Thunder. And they were able to pull that game out, but they still went through a gauntlet. And I just feel like the Knicks, the veteran savvy and the poise and just the fact that they're a little more well rested, I just think they're ready for this moment. I think they're gonna be ready for this moment, even over that 7'5" alien monster in San Antonio. And look, I'll be honest. I've gone back and forth on this series. I've gone back and forth. I think this matchup is a juicy matchup, and I think this series is going to be a long, hard-fought series. But look, man, as much as I'm a believer in Victor Wembanyama and what the Spurs have been able to do and accomplish, I think it's the Knicks' time. I do. I think the Knicks are gonna. I think the Knicks are gonna win this series, man. I don't want it to happen because I love seeing Knicks fans suffer. I laugh at their misery because they've been through a lot of misery over the years, man. For most of my, teenager and adult life, the Knicks have been a laughingstock franchise. All they've done is lose and fail. The Knicks for a 20-year period from the year 2000 to the 2020, all they've done is eat, sleep, breathe, lose. the Knicks, the Knicks have been a franchise that have been all they've done is eat, sleep, breathe, losing, but not no more. They've turned it around. They've become for the better part of the last 5-6 years. The Knicks have been a competent franchise. They've made winning moves. They've made winning decisions, and these aren't the laughingstock Knicks anymore. I think the Knicks are going to be ready for the moment, and I think they're going to win these NBA Finals. I got the New York Knicks over the San Antonio Spurs in 7 games, and that's my prediction. But despite all that, I think these NBA Finals is gonna be something special. I think we're gonna have some legendary moments. I think we're gonna have some legendary games. And hey, man, I'm looking forward to these NBA Finals. And I think the Spurs Knicks matchup, regardless of who wins, is gonna be a legendary one. Can't wait.